this meeting to order. I'm going to walk through the process that we follow for the meeting, and then we'll get started. So, good evening. This is the regularly scheduled September 28th meeting of the Geneva Planning and Zoning Commission. I am Scott Stocking, Chairman of the Commission. Tonight, for the benefit of those in the audience, which there aren't any right now, at least, Rebecca Holman, Mike Slifka, John Mead, Tim Moran, and Mim Emmons, and Community Development Director David DeGroot. Planning and Zoning Commission meetings air live on Geneva Broadcast Network, which can be viewed on Comcast Channel 10 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99, MetroNet Channel 93, or the city's YouTube channel. This evening, the Commission will host a public hearing for Agenda Item 5A regarding the city's proposed text amendments. As chairman of tonight's meeting, I will guide the public and the applicant and the Commission through the public hearing process, which is outlined in the back of the agenda. Please see this page for further details. The Commission will open the public hearing, and the applicant will provide an opening statement and brief overview of their request. Commission members will first have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. This will be followed by a public comment and testimony regarding the request. Audience members may be called on and given an opportunity to comment. We ask that you state your name and address and when it is your turn to speak. If your comment has already been made and your questions have already been asked, it is not necessary to repeat it. Remind members of the public to refrain from veering off topic and direct comments that are relevant to the requests being considered. Following the end of public testimony, the applicant will have an opportunity to provide a closing statement and answer questions or respond to any comments made from members of the public. Additional questions or comments may be stated by the Commission, but public comment will not be reopened. The public hearing may then be closed, followed by the Commission deliberation on separate requests. Any person speaking during the public hearing agree and understand anything they say will be considered sworn testimony and affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. In order to help with the quality of the meeting broadcast, I would remind all commissioners to mute themselves except when they are addressing the Commission. Commissioners are also encouraged to state their name prior to speaking or prior to providing a roll call vote to better assist our record keepers. For example, Stocking, yea, nay, or abstain. Okay, so that's how we're going to proceed this evening. Anna, please call the roll.
Mead.
Mead here.
Evans.
Evans here.
Slifka.
Slifka here.
Holloman.
Holloman here.
Madaskill. Moran.
Moran here.
Stocking.
Stocking here. All right, next item on the agenda, item number 3, approval of the agenda for this evening's meeting.
Move to approve the agenda, Slifka. Moran, second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next item is item number 4, approval of minutes of our last meeting, which was September 14th, 2023.
Move to approve the minutes of the September 14th, 2023 meeting. Slifka.
Holloman second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so we'll move on to our single public hearing item on this evening's agenda. It's 5A. It's RV charging stations. It's a text amendment, and the requests are for amendments to Title 11 of the Geneva City Code zoning ordinance related to regulations of electrical vehicle charging station. The proposed amendments include the following chapters and sections of Title 11. 11. Is that 11.1? Well, first item. 1, Chapter 2, Section 11-2-2, definitions of words and terms. Chapter 3, Section 11-3-3, accessory buildings and uses. Chapter 11, Section 11-11A-2, location, size, and other requirements. And the final one is Chapter 11, Section 11A-3, design and maintenance, and the applicant is the City of Geneva. David, I have items for the record.
Yes, the items, contents of this file include an application for a text amendment filed by the Community Development Department, a certificate of publication from the Daily Herald for the legal notice published on September 11th, 2023 for tonight's hearing, and a report from the Community Development Department to the Planning and Zoning Commission
Okay. And David, I believe you're going to walk us through these proposed changes.
I will. Thank you.
Oh, I did. I'm sorry. I normally don't do that, but sorry.
Okay, so we are in the first cohort of communities to receive technical assistance through this program and training in a variety of areas as we work towards the designation of being called an EV-ready community. Part of the program requires communities to develop clear permitting for electric vehicle charging stations or EV charging stations, and to analyze our zoning and parking regulations to make sure there's no barriers to providing these stations. Our zoning ordinance is currently silent on them. However, we have been interpreting them as an accessory use and permitting them. We do have a handful in town that we have allowed as an accessory use, both for residential and commercial properties. So we didn't identify any specific barriers in our zoning ordinance, but it's still recommended that we make amendments to clarify where they are allowed and that they, to state that they are explicitly allowed in both residential and commercial applications. So the first section that we're proposing amendments to is Chapter 2, Section 11.2-2, which is definitions of terms. We're proposing the definition shown in red on page 2 of the report for an electric vehicle and an electric vehicle charging station. We try to keep these definitions rather broad so we can encompass each type of charging stations. There's level 1, level 2, and fast charging stations, and to accommodate fully electric vehicles and then also plug-in hybrids. So that's why they're kind of broad definitions. Are there any questions on those proposals? Okay. And then Chapter 3, Section 11.3-3, accessory buildings and uses, is broken into two sections. We have attached accessory uses and detached. We're just clarifying that electric vehicle charging stations are allowed as an attached accessory use and as a detached. And when they are detached, that they have to comply with the required setbacks for parking areas so that it can't encroach into otherwise required landscape setbacks. Any questions on those amendments? Yes.
I had a question on the one you said before. I don't know if this is the right time to ask
Sure.
the question. In the electric vehicle charging station definition, it said the use shall be considered a gasoline fuel station for zoning purposes.
Okay, so yes, in that definition, we're trying to clarify that if it is the primary use of a zoning lot for retail purposes, that it would be treated the same as a fuel station for zoning purposes, meaning anywhere a gas station is permitted, it would be permitted. Anywhere a gas station requires a special use, if EV charging stations are the primary use, it would require the special use. So that's more.
Even though, I mean, they feel so different to me as far as like the permitted use and stuff like that. Like a gas station seems like it would be a lot harder to get a permit to open a gas station than to have an EV charging.
I think we were viewing it as a heavily auto-oriented use, where
okay.
you would have vehicles coming, charging, usually a very well-lit property. So we're treating them the same from a zoning standpoint, just in terms of where they're permitted and where they're not, or where they might require a special use.
Okay, so if somebody wanted to have a charging station, they could come and ask for, what am I trying to say? Just not to change the ordinance, but for us to allow it, even though it's like, because it's not a gas station, they could come and ask for permission, right? I mean, to.
Right, well, what the definition is trying to state is that if they wanted to open up like a retail EV charging business, and that was the primary use of the property. Anywhere a gas station is allowed is where that would be allowed, so they wouldn't have to come back and ask.
I mean, if it
Special.
wasn't allowed, if it was in an area where a gas station wasn't allowed, because for a gas station, you have to dig
Right.
underground and do all that work, right? And you don't really have to do that for a charging station, do you?
I mean, you have to make sure you have. the
But I mean, it's
utility
not
there,
a
but-
substance that could like catch on fire. And, you know, like all the,
You don't have the underground tanks. and things
yeah,
that.
like all the dangers of a gas station in a traditional sense. So I guess I just thought it was interesting that those two were being tied together. Am I making?
No, but I think, may
Yes.
they would come.
I think what, those attributes, like not having toxic materials and not having exhaust from automobiles, would factor into our discussion to determining whether, let's just use, say, the Dunkin' Donuts site, if that was being considered for an electric charging station instead of the old gas station, we might think, wow, they're not putting tanks anymore and fuel there, so that
Right.
might affect our willingness to allow a special use on a site if it was electric charging versus if it was a fuel station. So, I mean, that would just factor into our discussion, I think.
Yeah, so another example would be like Home Depot, let's say, and that they
Right.
just, as for their customers, they decide to put a bank of electric charging stations out there.
So they would
Slots that-
need to come here, though, and ask for an exception, right? I just wanted to be clear about, like, because when I read that, I thought, well, a gas station seems like there's a lot more risk than, so so they would need to come back to us and ask for,
If it was in a location where a gas station wasn't allowed, but it's again,
Correct,
only if
yeah.
it's the primary use. As an accessory use,
okay, only if it's the primary.
like
use,
Walgreens
okay.
has an EV charging station, it's permitted.
Right.
And that would not be an issue. It wouldn't be considered a gas station. But if it was, say 25 spaces and that was the primary use, that would typically be open 24 hours a day, like most gas stations, and be a very well-lit area. They would probably have waiting areas for people to stay. So we were treating it similarly to a gas station with like a food mart.
Right.
I was confused by the Home Depot example, though, because Home Depot would not be the primary use.
Right.
Right, in that case, that'd be an accessory use.
Right,
Yeah, it'd be accessory use, yeah.
okay.
David, I've seen detached EV charging stations. What's an example? Attached, it's actually attached in the building
If it
itself?
was attached to like the side of the building.
Yeah.
And there's
Is
a
that what-
parking space
Is that what
you
you're
can pull
talking
up to,
about?
right.
So like it's in the wall of the primary structure?
Or attached to the wall of the primary
Yeah,
structure.
that
and-
would be an
yeah.
example of an attached one.
Right.
Okay.
Excuse me, David, would that also be like inside of a parking garage or something, that would be considered attached?
Right. And in that case, definitely an accessory use, if it's not external.
It's totally inside.
Right. So then, the next proposed amendment is to section 11A2, location, size, and other requirements, and the text shown there on the bottom of page 3 in red. We're trying to clarify that although EV charging stations are not required in parking lots, when they are provided, they count towards the minimum number of spaces provided. So if a business does want to reserve a few spots for EV charging station, or for EV vehicles for their customers to charge, they don't have to provide an additional 3 spots. It still counts towards the parking minimum.
In thinking through that, and I think I'm fine with it, but in thinking through it, I was, and maybe it's self-regulating. There's a situation, if the minimum required was 50 spaces, and you put 3 charging stations in, you have 47 for regular cars, because I don't think they want a gas-consuming car parking in a charging station spot.
Right.
I suppose that owner could get ahead of the game and make 30 spaces charging stations, and then you really, if the primary, you'd only have 20 then spaces for gasoline vehicles, so they really would not be meeting the minimum standard if there really wasn't that much demand. I mean, do you know what I mean? It could get out of whack before it gets into check. I think as we get more and more electric vehicles, but somebody could take away gasoline-powered parking spaces for electric before there was demand there, I suppose, and then thus not meet the city's minimum requirement for parking.
I think it's part
Couldn't
of
the
the,
gasoline ones park in the electric spaces?
I don't know. I don't know what the protocol
They
is.
they would be forbidden from
Right.
parking in the electric spaces?
I would think so.
yes.
And that certainly could happen, what you're saying.
Yeah.
But again, I think some of that is self-policing where you don't want to, you want to make sure you have parking available for your customers.
Right.
And when there becomes a greater
It's
demand
prob-
for more
I'm just,
space.
it's a hypothetical, but I think it would be probably self-regulated by supply and demand, so.
I was just gonna say, I understand John's point, but I also,
Sorry.
thanks, man. I also keep in mind that they're not putting these in out of the goodness of their heart. This is profit motive. So if they're tying up 5 out of their mandatory 50 spaces, they're doing it for a reason. They're making money on this. Frankly, I think that's their call, if that's the way they want to do it. But it is, I think self-policing could become an issue, but it's not something that I feel strongly about.
Right. And if it became an issue, that's something down the road we might address as we see what the actual dynamic is, as this becomes a reality.
Yeah, no, I was just say that along the same lines, that if someone makes a bad decision and, and there are not spaces and cars for that business are parking where they shouldn't, on the street and other people's lots, something like that, would there be any recourse to, and I don't know, I don't know how you decide what the right number of spaces is, but, so that's just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's why we aren't requiring minimums at this point, because we don't really know what that dynamic is as the demand continues to increase. And, I mean, there's just the act that passed earlier this year in 2024, all new homes will be required to be EV-ready, capable for an EV charger. All new multifamily buildings will be required to have every space available or capable for an EV charger. So, as they become more prevalent, I think you'll have more people charging at home. I mean, not relying on these.
Yeah.
It's a convenience to have publicly available spaces, but not really.
Yeah, but I think again, just to encourage it and not make it a penalty, so like this subtracts from their required, parking.
Right.
That's just, I think that's a little too heavy right now. Let's just see how it works out. So, okay.
Then the final section, we're proposing to add some maintenance and design requirements for EV charging stations. Number one, just maintenance, making sure that any bollards or protective equipment around it is being maintained, that they're being kept in good repair for their useful life, that if they're not working, there's a phone number and contact information so we can contact the operator. Number two is protection, again, making sure that there's barrier curbing or bollards around it to make sure that the charging equipment itself is protected from vehicular traffic. Number three, to make sure that any fees being charged are clearly identified for the user. And number four, notification on what kind of charger it is, which type of voltage it is, how long you're allowed to use it, and any other necessary safety information. And then the last one is number five, is signage, allowing for on-site advertising, allowing for LED screens, not static messages though, not continuous video, no sound being emitted, signs not directed towards the public right-of-way, so similar to the kind of video screens you'll see at a gas pump. And that's the totality of the amendments.
Tim?
I just had a question. First of all, I now know what a bollard is. I asked earlier, so I don't have to ask that question. The property owner of the equipment shall be responsible for the maintenance. I see a distinction here, and again, turning to the gas station analogy. So at the gas station, the property owner and the fuel pump owner are all the same people. I don't necessarily see that happening here. I see the real estate owner leasing these machines. And so I guess I have a question that, let's say the market goes bust and the equipment owner just says to heck with it, I'm just going to abandon the things. Is there any recourse against the real estate owner so that the thing doesn't become dangerous or a public issue, broken machinery out there? Or would that be under just a general ordinance of maintaining your real estate?
So you're suggesting maybe adding another, maybe number 6, that if they become abandoned or defunct, that they need to be removed?
Well-
So they don't become a danger?
I think that's implied in number 1, and so say for instance, I own a lot and I lease 3 spaces out to XYZ EV charging, and they are under a lease agreement. As an owner, I know I have to maintain that, so I would transfer that obligation in the lease vehicle to the lessee you're gonna put this in, you're going to maintain it per code of Geneva. And if they don't, or they walk away, then I as a landowner have recourse to them under the lease. But if they don't perform, I've got to either remove them. That's just, as a landlord, that's just the situation I've gotten myself into.
No, and I understand, but if I've learned anything in practicing law for 35 years, doing things by implication usually causes problems. I'm reading that a number of these electric fuel stations, now, these are ones that tend to be off in isolated areas. That's exactly what's happening. They're abandoning them. They're not making the money on them they expected to, and so they're just sitting there, and people are, I guess they're stripping them. There's copper wire or something in there.
Sure.
And I understand what you're saying, but there is no right of subrogation for the city to step into the shoes of the real estate owner and say, you got to fix this. So the real estate owner absolutely has the right under the lease to say fix it or get rid of it.
Right.
But if they don't, do we have any mechanism to force the real estate owner to clean it up?
I don't know why we wouldn't. I'm not suggesting
No,
I'm not suggesting that we have any relationship with the lessee. I'm saying that we would go to the owner and say, regardless, if your tenant's not performing, you still have to maintain, these aren't being maintained, they have to come out of pocket and maintain it or take it down or whatever it is.
That's the nature of my question, but that is not here. That is somewhere else. So if that falls under,
Maintain.
so this only deals with the lessee
Property owner,
of the machinery, not the real estate.
well, the property owner of the equipment.
Right, who is almost certainly a lessee.
Shall be responsible, well, the property owner of the equipment, so that would, yeah, that is written interestingly. We have no relationship with the property owner of the equipment. We
Right.
only have a relationship with the property owner, the landowner.
That's correct.
The lessor.
So I guess the question is, if we have general police powers under ordinances, other ordinances, then this is fine with me.
I think I hear your concern, and I would recommend adding that language explicitly here. We have similar language like in the sign ordinance that when a business goes out and they can't just leave the signs up, they have to take the signs down. So in this case, if the owner of the equipment left it
Fails to perform.
behind, it would be
Yeah.
the owner's responsibility to have
The owner of the land is what you're
Right.
saying.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, yeah,
So-
that's what I was thinking.
Much in the same way as the gas station. Is that what we're establishing? That the owner of the land is responsible for the underground tanks?
Right.
The same way that the owner of the land ultimately is responsible for these charging stations, so.
So we can either add language to number 1 or add number 6.
Right.
I think it probably makes more sense to tie it into number 1 there.
Yeah, I think so too.
Either that, or if you did a separate 6, it would be all conditions under C 1 through 5, not that are not performed by the owner of the equipment shall fall to the, or whatever the proper word would be, shall fall to the underlying landowner slash lessor, or something like that. You can do a catch-all, and then it would catch everything. I don't know that that's, if it needs to catch everything, but it would, whether it's,
It's enforceable by
Yeah.
the city,
Right.
which is what we're looking for. Yeah. Any other comments on that?
we just have to craft language, which we can do.
I don't think we have to pin down the exact language, but I think I have the direction
You get the-
needed. We want to amend number 1 to include language that if the equipment is abandoned or is otherwise inoperable, it shall be removed.
Something like failure of equipment property owner to perform under this clause shall transfer to underlying landowner or something like that,
Yeah,
in the event of
the
failure. of performance.
responsibility, right.
Failure of prop equipment owner to perform shall, transfer, something to the effect, transfer this obligation to the underlying landowner or property owner. I'm gonna say landowner because we already have equipment owner and
Right.
there's
Yeah.
a distinguish.
Two different, yeah,
Okay, that can be added.
okay.
The only other comment I had on this was I'm happy to see some restriction on the signage and the screens and the scrolling. We had one other instance in town, which I think we all wish we could revisit, that had scrolling advertising in multiple colors that can be a distraction from blocks away. And I don't think this will be the case, especially with probably the size of, the only thing I might add is, would you want to consider a screen size? But it's not going to be, it's certainly not going to be the size of what I'm thinking out on Caneville Road, so.
No, but they are getting creative in terms of what they're displaying on the
Yeah,
devices and
right,
stuff. What I've been
right.
seeing, it's like
So I would leave it alone now, but if it ever became an issue, maybe I want to revisit that.
the actual structure itself has like a lighted, backlit screen, like a TV screen.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The one in the Jewel parking lot is like that.
Mhm.
I haven't ever stopped and looked at it, but it was my impression it wasn't advertising anything sold in Jewel. Just kind of from the pictures going as I was walking by.
Yeah.
It seemed to
Yeah,
be-
I haven't seen anything
I haven't seen that. yeah.
tied to like another business or anything like
I know,
that.
suppose you wanted a public service announcement on it, could you do that?
On the
As long as
EV
it met
charging
this,
station.
probably.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't be the connection with the tenants or the goods and services. Suppose you wanted to advertise a city event, Swedish Days coming up, or something
They'll
like that.
probably advertise whoever will pay them money to put their message on the screen.
But they
Maybe,
can't,
yeah.
it says it has to be promotion of goods, services, and
Wouldn't.
products of the owner and tenants on site.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well-
so it's not a commercial billboard, basically.
Right.
Right, so you couldn't do a public service message.
I think limiting it, the intent was limiting it to the on-site advertisement would
Right.
maybe avoid them becoming oversized and becoming
Right.
Yes.
intentional distraction.
Planters, peanuts, buy one, get one free in Walgreens or something.
Right.
Well, that you could put on there.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
you could,
but
but
sitting
you
on a
couldn't, but you
Walgreens
couldn't,
site,
don't miss Swedish Days.
Although, just doubling back on number 1, when we use the word owner here, is this the owner of the real estate? Is this the owner of the machine?
The property owner of the equipment, it says
Yeah.
in the second line.
Right.
Yeah, I think the
Should we
word
stop
You're
Property,
property,
limited
it's
to the
the charging-
property owner of the
and it-
equipment.
Station
Here,
itself
it
is the
Really
property.
doesn't make much sense.
No, because it says any business on site here, products of the owner and tenants on site.
So it could advertise,
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not interested in complicating this.
and we can always, this is the first round, in 5 years we'll
Sure.
understand how this is.
We learned by
Once there's
doing.
hundreds of them in the
Yeah.
community, hopefully.
Yes, right, exactly.
No, I was just saying, but I think in in 5, the fact that the signs can't be visible from the public right away is,
Good
you know,
point.
will
That's a
help
good
to
point.
provide a lot of control.
Yeah,
So-
that will take care of a lot of things right there, yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments on it? It was good. Any other
Good job.
comments?
Well, a lot of those, like when you go to the gas station and, you know, there's the screen or whatever, they don't come on until you start the pump.
Yeah.
So is that sort of the intention of these as well? Like if they're not in use, they're not on
don't-
as far as the advertising and things
Oh,
like?
no, I don't.
I've never used one. I haven't used one, so
Yeah.
I've or been near one
But you're
to
right,
use.
yeah,
mean,
when
that
when the
could-
fuel starts going, it goes on. and
Yeah, as soon as you
Now,
start
I've gotten
charging,
good at
then it
finding the
goes
button
on.
to turn the sound
Sorry, I'm
off.
not able to hear.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry, we're just rambling. Yeah. Any other comments?
Move to close. Move to close the public hearing?
Second?
Moved and seconded. Anna, please call the roll.
Mead,
Mead, aye.
Evans,
Evans, aye?
Slivka,
Slivka, aye.
Holloman,
Holloman, aye.
Moran,
Moran, aye.
Stocking.
Stocking eye.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. To propose zoning ordinance text amendments as follows. Chapter 2, number 1, Chapter 2, Section 11-2-2, definition of words and terms related to defining the terms electric vehicle and electric vehicle charging station. Number 2, Chapter 3, Section 11-3-3, accessory buildings and uses related to the permitted locations of electric vehicle charging stations as attached or detached accessory structures. Number 3, Chapter 11, Section 11-11A-2, location, size, and other requirements related to the computation of required parking spaces when electric vehicle charging stations are provided. And number 4, Chapter 11, Section 11-11A-3, design and maintenance related to the design and maintenance of parking spaces with electric vehicle charging stations, subject to the findings of fact in the staff report, and further amended to include under Chapter 11, Section 11-11A-3, C1, maintenance of electrical vehicle charging stations, in addition of a sentence effectively saying, failure of property equipment owner to perform shall transfer this obligation to the underlying landowner.
Moran, second.
Moved and seconded. Anna, please call the roll.
Mead,
Mead, aye.
Evans,
Evans, aye?
Slivka,
Slivka, aye.
Holloman,
Holloman, aye.
Moran,
Moran, aye.
Stocking.
Stocking eye. All right, great. So the next item on our agenda is public comment. There's no one present, so no public comment. Next one's other business. David, what do we got coming up?
Just a few updates. This coming Monday, the city council will consider the Roosevelt, the mixed-use project on East State Street that you considered at the last meeting, along with the fence variation at 304 Deerfield Way. They will also be considering a request to extend the site plan approval for the Duke and Lee's property at 609 South Third Street. That was a mixed-use project approved back in 2020
Right,
for
right.
60 apartments and about 6,000 square feet of retail. The owner has indicated that they have a very interested party, and they need one more extension, hopefully, to be able to close that deal.
Was wondering what was going on with
So
that.
the original execution
I thought it-
partner, Golub, and the other party they're no longer involved?
It was, Sumac was the original.
Sumac, and
Yeah.
they were joint venturing with Golub, I believe.
Okay.
So,
They, I think, have had a separation,
okay.
but they are looking to sell the entitlements, and there's an interested party that thinks they can move the project forward.
Okay.
So.
Excellent.
And then on October 12th, we will have a meeting to consider an amendment to the East Gateway PUD for the Quick Trip gas station that we saw as a concept review a few months ago. This is just an amendment to the PUD to allow it on the corner, the southwest corner of Kirk and State. So
I
it's-
will not be able to attend that meeting.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Anybody else not going to be here?
I should be good.
I'll be here.
And then on October 23rd, the city council will consider the Venture Park project on South Kirk, the warehouse project you considered back in August. That's all I have.
Okay. Anything else from the commissioners? Any words of wisdom?
No, just
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
All right, thank you, Neb.
Everybody?